After Italy's defeat in World War II, the Allies decided to strip Italy of its African colonies. However, just 5 years later, Italian forces returned to Somalia to reclaim control of the colony. Why did this happen? Why was Somalia handed back to Italy despite the country's defeat in the war? In 1947, Italy signed the Paris Peace Treaty, in which it renounced all claims to its pre-war colonies, including Libya, Eritrea, and Italian Somaliland. The treaty outlined that the fate of these territories would be determined collectively by the Soviet Union, Great Britain, the United States, and France. If these powers couldn't agree within a year, the United Nations General Assembly would have the final say. Each of the 4 victorious powers had distinct goals when it came to Italy's colonies. Great Britain, aiming to strengthen its influence in East Africa, sought to claim the Italian colonies for itself. British Foreign Secretary Ernest Bevin proposed the creation of a Greater Somalia under British trusteeship. To understand this, we need to look at the United Nations trusteeship system. The UN was fundamentally against colonialism, but acknowledged that many native populations lacked the governance, experience necessary for self-rule. To address this, the UN introduced the trusteeship system, inherited from the League of Nations. This meant territories would be placed under the temporary administration of a designated power, which would help them transition to self-governance and eventual independence. Britain saw trusteeship as a strategic opportunity, treating it as an extension of colonialism. This was evident in their ambitions for Libya, a former Italian colony, which Britain considered vital for Mediterranean control. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union sought trusteeship over Tripolitania, aiming to establish a Mediterranean base for its fleet. When their request was denied, Soviet diplomats shifted to opposing trusteeship altogether, instead pushing for the immediate independence of all former Italian colonies. The United States, while opposed to colonialism, was concerned about Soviet influence in Africa. They proposed that Italy's former colonies be directly administered by the United Nations. France was the only nation that supported Italy retaining control over its colonies. This wasn't out of forgiveness towards Italy, but due to France's fear that granting independence to Italy's former colonies might inspire similar demands in Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco, thus weakening its own colonial empire. When the 4 powers failed to reach an agreement within the set 1-year period, the decision was left to the United Nations General Assembly. This shift meant that the colonial powers now had to negotiate with former colonies from Asia and Latin America, who were less sympathetic to European colonial ambitions. A compromise was reached, granting immediate independence to Libya, while Eritrea was given to Ethiopia. As for Somalia, the United States' approach had changed, and with the Cold War in full swing, the U.S. was more willing to compromise its anti-colonial stance to counter the Soviet threat. The global community opposed the idea of Britain acquiring new territories, and immediate independence for Somalia was seen as a recipe for chaos. Additionally, many countries lacked the experience or infrastructure to manage an African territory. Italy, with its prior colonial experience, was chosen to administer Somalia under a UN trusteeship. Italy, by this point a NATO member, already had the necessary infrastructure and experience to govern the territory. Assigning Somalia to Italy also ensured it would not fall under Soviet influence, while symbolizing Italy's post-war transition from fascism to a member of the Western Bloc, keeping Italy out of the Soviet sphere. On November 21, 1949, the UN General Assembly voted to place Somalia under Italian administration until 1960. After that, Somalia would gain independence and form the Somali Republic, alongside British Somaliland. Thank you for watching, and a special thank you to my Patreon supporter, Rostislav Tamanortian.